I wrote a book some time ago called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. And it is published in Hungarian as well,
Mm.
in which I look back over my life and ask myself, what have I learned that I wish I had learned much earlier? And one of them is what we just talked about. I wish I had understood the love language concept before we got married. Because when I came down off that super, super high, in the early stages of being in love, I thought, oh, I don't know what's happened, but I don't have those feelings anymore. And I was deeply troubled by that. Uh, and if I had known that the average lifespan of that euphoric stage that we call being in love is about 2 years, some a little longer, some a little less, average about 2 years, we come down off that high. So I wish I had known that kind of love is not going to carry us through. Now, I was always told when I was younger, I was told by other people, if you've got the real thing, if you're really in love, it's going to last forever. Well, that's not true. We come down off that high. And that's why if we don't learn to speak each other's love language, we're going to lose those positive feelings. And likely they'll be replaced with negative feelings. And that's when many couples begin to feel like, oh, I married the wrong person. This is not working out. And it's just that they've never learned how to speak each other's love language. So that's one thing. Another thing I wish I had learned before I got married, I think it's really important for young couples, is how to solve our conflicts without arguing with each other. Every couple will have conflicts. They will not agree on everything. And they feel strongly about their position. He knows he's right, she knows he's right. And they try to convince each other, arguing with each other and say, well, that's not right, and that's not right, and they argue. And after a while, they're raising their voice, they're talking harshly to the other person, and that doesn't help a marriage at all. And I wish I had known that we were going to have conflicts. Every couple will have conflicts. We're going to disagree on things. We're going to feel strongly that our position is right. But we've got to learn how to put ourselves in the eyes and look at the world through the eyes of the other person and try to understand what they're saying and what they're feeling. And if we will ask questions, now explain that to me one more time. I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Mm.
We can come to the place where we can say to each other, I hear what you're saying, and now I can see how that makes sense, and now let me share my side. And you listen to me, and then you can say, I can see how you would feel that way. I can see how that makes sense. So obviously we disagree on it. How can we solve the problem? And we spend our time finding a solution to the problem rather than trying to win an argument. I've sometimes said this: if you have an argument with your spouse and you win the argument, that is, they say to you, okay, have it your way. You won the argument, but they lost. It's no fun to live with a loser. Why would you
Mm.
want to create one? We're
Mm.
not we're not competing in this marriage. We're on the same team, and we need to work together as a team and find a solution to those things where we disagree on those things. Yeah, I wish I'd known that before we got married.
Mm. Mm. I see. Yeah, thank you so much. It's very sad for me to see that there are more and more young Christian couples who are deciding to get a divorce. And yeah, I'm curious about your advice. What can they do to save their relationship? Because I think yeah, if someone is at that point that they are deciding like, oh, maybe we should get a divorce, they feel that there is a huge gap between them and their partner, and it's hard to take the first step towards the other.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that happens all too often. And I think a lot of it is because we don't understand the love languages and we have not been speaking each other's love language. And we come down off that high, and then we have our conflicts, and we end up arguing with each other and say hateful things to each other. Now we have negative feelings toward each other. And we honestly feel like this is not working. We're too different. It's never going to work out. Listen, and then what happens many times is one of them meets somebody else and they get attracted to someone else. And then they begin to have positive feelings for them. And over here in their marriage, it's negative feelings. And so eventually they convince themselves, I've got to get out of this marriage. This is not making me happy. And they go off over here to the other person. They fail to understand that in 2 years, they'll come down off the high in that second marriage. And if they don't learn how to treat each other like a human and respect each other's ideas and not argue with each other, but find solutions, they're going to go through the same thing again. In America, the divorce rate in second marriages is higher than the divorce rate in first marriages. The answer is not running to find someone else. The answer is learning how to love the person you're now married to. And that's why I think I would highly recommend folks read that book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. I think even if they've been married 5 years and 7 years and now they're thinking about divorce. And I wrote another book that's also in Hungarian. It's called One More Try, What to Do When Your Marriage is Falling Apart. Mm-hmm. And and they'll find a lot of practical help in that book in terms of how to begin to think in terms of making our marriage work rather than thinking in terms of, I've got to get out of this marriage, you know. So one of the factors is, by nature, we see the other person as the problem. If you talk to a couple who's in trouble in their marriage, and you talk to the husband, and he tells you what's wrong, he'll tell you all the things that are wrong with his wife. He'll tell you all the things that she's doing wrong. You talk to her, she'll tell you all the things he's doing wrong. That's just natural. But Jesus said, don't try to get the speck out of your mate's eye until you get the plank out of your own eye. That's why the place to start is to say, Lord, where am I failing in my marriage? What am I doing wrong? And if you pray that prayer, God will answer that prayer. He'll tell you what you're doing wrong. You know, you've been yelling and screaming and saying hateful, nasty things, and the Bible says, be kind to one another. Be forgiving of one another. Love one another. It's a command to love one another. It's not talking about a feeling. It's talking about an attitude. Look, have the attitude of love. I'm in this marriage to help my spouse. I want to enrich their life. And I haven't been loving. God will tell you where you're failing, and then you confess those things to God, and then go to your spouse. God will forgive you. Then go to your spouse and say, I've been thinking about us, and I asked God to show me where I was failing you and things I have done that are wrong. And he gave me a pretty good list. And I've asked God to forgive me, and I want to ask you to forgive me. And can I share these with you? And you just share with those things where you know that you're wrong. And ask if they will possibly forgive you. And even if they don't forgive you at the moment, they'll walk away thinking, wow, I never thought I'd hear those words. All I've heard for 3 years or 6 years or 5 years is how bad I am. And now they're acknowledging their own failures. God can use your apology to touch their heart. And in due time, they may come back and say, well, I've been thinking about this, and there's some things I need to apologize to you for. And you get that wall torn down by apologies. And now you can begin to learn each other's love language, begin speaking it. The love feelings begin to come back. And now you're on a road to having a good marriage. So I think there's two essentials to having a long-term healthy marriage. One is we have to learn to speak each other's love language and speak it on a regular basis. And secondly, we have to learn to deal with our failures. And that means apologizing and in choosing to forgive each other. And none of us are perfect. We're never going to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to have a good marriage, but you do have to deal with your failures. Because if you yell and scream and harsh and mean toward your spouse and you don't do anything about it, it's a barrier between the two of you. And you do it again, and it's another brick in the wall, you know, and you build walls. We build walls between us. And you can't have a good marriage if you don't deal with your failures. So we've got to learn how to apologize and then learn how to forgive each other. And that's huge in having a good marriage.